Welcome to the Wild Type Podcast. I'm Lyssa Lizards.
I'm Neptune the Chameleon. And we're your reptile girlies.
Oh, well, happy 4th of July week.
Yes, for this episode.
Yes.
Very clever in the
Yes,
title of this,
we
which is
are.
100% your idea.
Oh, thank you. I'm very, very proud of it.
Yes.
So red, white, and in blue, because we're talking about shedding.
Talking about shedding. Yes, so excited. Also,
Yeah.
to address the elephant in the room, I forgot my headphones. So I feel naked right now.
Yeah, that you do look a little weird. I'm not used to seeing you without the headphones in this setting.
Luckily, it's a good hair day. Like, I washed
It is
it
a
today
very
because
good
it would
hair
have been
day.
very unfortunate if it was a bad hair day.
That would suck.
Which you could usually get away with the headphones,
Yes.
but because I don't,
Yes. Yeah.
I can't afford.
Just so anybody knows, like, we are very grateful for the headphones because it hides all of our hair
Yes.
issues.
Yes. So I went on a work trip last week and I
Yeah.
used my noise canceling headphones on plane rides
Yeah.
and stuff. And literally as I was coming over here, I was like, notebook, which I remembered, and all these other things. And I was
important.
like, and don't forget your headphones. And then I forgot them.
It happens to the best of us. It's okay. Usually they live here unless
Yeah.
you're traveling.
Yeah. So I don't have to think to bring them. Yeah. So anyways,
So that's fun.
moving past that.
All good. But we hope that everybody is having a lovely 4th of July weekend. We are rocking blue
Yes.
for this
Feeling
whole little
festive.
topic.
Yeah. And for all of
so-
our non-American listeners.
Yes. We hear you too.
Yeah.
We appreciate you. We're just in America. So
We're just in America.
gonna-
This is what we're dealing with. Yeah, but this will still be a super helpful episode because shedding is obviously a huge topic with
For sure.
reptile keeping and
The amount of like comments that I get of people like kind of like freaking out, like, what do I do? How do I help? It's like,
it's a weird thing because it doesn't happen with other animals. Like your dog sheds, but not
but like
sheds fur, but not
it's fur.
yeah, but not like their skin, like their
Right.
little skin. And then
Yeah.
if you keep like small mammals, like a herbal
Herbal.
hamster or a gerbil. I
It
don't.
just
It
makes
just
me think of like herbs. Like it's like I want to start an herb garden.
a herbal. Just have a
Herbal.
hamster named Parsley. Yeah, no, I just
Herbal tea.
a small mammal. Okay,
Yes.
Then they're not shedding their skin. Like
No.
it's like kind of a weird thing, but
It feels very, very unnatural to us.
Yes.
The way that they do it. But like it's the most natural thing in the world to them.
yeah.
So it's one of those things where like if you're a new reptile keeper, like the shedding aspect might totally freak you out.
Yeah, and it changes over time, right? Like a baby reptile versus an adult reptile, a snake
100%.
versus a lizard. Like there's so many nuances with shedding.
So many. So
we
we're
want
gonna
to talk about
We're
it.
gonna chat through it with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe we should start off by just like what is shedding,
yeah. So basically like
or like why do they shed in the first place?
I mean, technically, if you want to get like real nitty gritty, humans shed our skin cells too. We just do it in a way that like we don't notice it when it's happening.
Yeah, unless
like,
you get sunburned. Like,
yeah, which I'm actually sunburned right now.
peeling?
I'm literally peeling right here. So
can we just say you're shedding
I'm totally shedding right now.
instead of peeling? Shedding's the new peeling.
I am.
But like the way that we peel from
Yes.
like a sunburn is very similar. So reptiles are constantly growing.
Yeah.
And a younger reptile is going to have a much higher growth rate than an adult reptile, which is why we see a lot of differences in shedding frequency based off of their growth rate.
Which I know does freak out some new keepers because they're like, he hasn't shed in like 3 months. And I'm like, well, how old is he?
All the time. And it's just because no one talks about the nuances of the frequency. So the reason why they're shedding is because they're growing. So
Yes.
then they'll shed and then they have
Yeah.
their new skin and then the process kind of just like repeats itself.
Yeah, totally. And again, it's different by species. Like I know with snakes, it can kind of give you a little bit of a glimpse into like how their husbandry is doing and like things like that. So there's just a lot.
There's a lot that goes
We're
into
gonna
it.
get into all of it.
Yeah. So maybe we can talk about how often they shed because
Yeah.
we were like briefly touching on it anyway. So like
Yeah.
as mentioned, a younger reptile is going to shed more often because
Yeah.
their growth rate is higher.
Yes.
So I see this all the time for chameleon keepers because to your point, they like freak out. So a baby chameleon will shed in like a matter of hours and they
Yeah.
just like poof. And then they just shed
Yeah.
and they're good and they're done versus like my adult chameleon shed maybe like twice a year versus
Also-
every couple of weeks.
Also, can we talk about the fact specifically with chameleons? Because I have had one in the past, and when I had him, like their sheds also, and again, this is specific to chameleons, so not all other species, but their sheds take so much longer because like I remember like Barney would get kind of pale, and I know you call it like potato mode when like
their colors are just duller.
They're just dull and drab and just kind of like,
because the skin's starting to separate, right? So it's like creating this kind of like whitish, grayish hue on them.
And that does happen with all reptiles. As they're shedding, you'll start to notice that they're a little bit paler, they're a little bit duller, and you can just tell that there's something up with the skin. And that's when we'll get like the DMs of like,
SOS.
What's happening? I'm like, it's normal, it's fine, don't freak out.
Yeah.
But it is, you do start to notice it. But with chameleons specifically, like Barney would take like, it would be like a 2 or 3 month process sometimes where like most of his shed would be like good to go and ready to come off. And then there would be parts that would just be there for an extra month.
Yeah. And I always tell this to new keepers, like who get a new chameleon, because it is a bit jarring if you don't know the differences. I'm like, this is what's normal for a baby, a juvenile, and adult. And I always say with the adults, they'll shed more in sections than all at once. Like they'll shed the top of their head. Then 3 weeks go by, and then their left arm. Yeah. And then another 3 weeks go by, and then their back.
Barney's feet would always explode first.
Oh,
it was always
cute.
the feet and like the tip of his little like spikes in the back. Like those would always be the first things to start like popping off.
Yeah.
It was so cute.
Versus a baby that just literally poofs like a piece of popcorn.
A couple hours.
And then they're
done.
completely done. Yeah. So there's a lot of like little nuances with that.
Yes. And then so this one's kind of interesting. So we just did a little bit of chatting about specifically chameleons and how they peel off in sections. And so with chameleons, it's because they're dry shedders. They are not a species, and bearded dragons fall in this category too. They're not a species that needs like a lot of moisture or humidity to help with their shed. And so when they're shedding, theirs comes off in chunks and pieces and parts. Yeah. Whereas other species, like for example, crested geckos or like definitely snakes, all snakes, they come off more in like one piece, and humidity plays a huge role in that happening correctly. So we can get into that, but I did just want to mention, when we're talking about them coming apart in the pieces, it's more so because they are what is called dry shedders.
Right, the type of shedder.
Yeah. So with that said,
well, we should wrap up on the frequency, right, of how long. So we talked chameleons, but for snakes, does the frequency also take longer as they get bigger?
Yes, with snakes, that it is also, like for example, with some of my bigger snakes, I mean, they're still very much growing, but like I think they may shed a max of like 2 to 3 times a year at the most. And, but when they were babies, it was like every, 2 or 3 months usually. And so it just kind of like, the way I would interpret it is every time your pet sheds, no matter the species, in my opinion, it will probably get a little bit longer in between each shed every time. So just like expect that in terms of frequency.
That's a fair thing.
Yeah.
I've also had people reach out and then they'll get their new animal and then they'll shed like 2 times like really quickly. Yeah. I'm always curious. I don't know what exactly would like cause that, because again, it's a growth rate thing. So I'm like, maybe they have proper care, so they're just growing faster than... I don't know about that one. But
I don't know. That's interesting. But yeah, I mean, I would just expect that no matter what, each time they shed, it'll be a little bit longer in between each next shed.
Yeah. So don't freak out if it takes...
Yeah, if it used to happen every month and now it's only happening every like few months, like don't worry, that's normal.
And they'll shed when they're ready, right? People are like, oh, how can I get them to shed? All this, like they will shed when they're ready. This is a very natural process. It is 100% indicative of having proper care, their natural growth rate, their species. Like there's so many things that go into it, and we just gotta let them do their thing. And if that means it's like 4 months between sheds, if that means it's 2 weeks between sheds, they'll shed when they're ready.
Yep. And the only time that you should ever help them with anything is only if it's like been stuck for a long time, or it's like a rescue situation.
We should probably on the end of this circle back on like stuck shed, because that's a whole other thing topic. Just by itself. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about dry shedder, so maybe we can kind of like give some do's and don'ts for dry shedders, and then do's and don'ts for like humid shedders. Yeah, because there's nuances.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of goes into a little bit of like helping with sheds. So like specifically for the more humid species, so I would go as far as saying like most snakes, because they do shed in one piece, that has a lot to do with humidity. And then also like the New Caledonian geckos, those are all species that need to have a decent amount of humidity. And that just goes into how you're keeping them and if you're keeping them in proper husbandry. So like when it comes to that, you just have to make sure that you're maintaining their proper humidity in their enclosure, which does help if you're doing bioactive enclosures. That helps quite a bit. Yep. But if you do notice that for example, crested geckos, they shed not necessarily in one piece, but they
eat their shed.
Yes, and so do leopard geckos. So most, and I'm not giving a blanket statement of all, but most geckos eat their shed. Most.
Which is freaky. Again, if you don't know, that's what happens.
Which is also an interesting thing to add that I just find to be kind of like a fun fact. There are people who will have pet reptiles if they only have like, say, a leopard gecko, an African fat-tailed gecko, or a crested gecko, and that's like the only species they keep or work with. You might never see your reptile shed.
Yeah, I've had Pluto for 5 years now.
And how often have you seen him?
Like 3 times.
Yeah. It's like, so those species, because it is their natural instinct to eat their shed, if you catch them shedding, it's like, that's exciting.
Well, also because he's a New Caledonian, he's nocturnal, right? So
they'll eat their shed at night.
It also has to be I have to be up late enough to even see him. And it happens to, and it's less obvious for me with him because they have their fired down and fired up color. Yes. So it's less obvious to me color-wise to tell like, oh, he's getting close to shedding versus my chameleons. It's very, very obvious when they're close to shedding. So I'm not like, ooh, any day now, Pluto's gonna, I would be like, surprise. And then he'll just be like, chewing on his arm. And I'm like, oh.
Like in my experience, like, I mean, I think I caught Charlie, my leopard gecko, with his shed. I mean, I don't even remember the last time I saw him shed. It has been so long. And granted, he's 15 years old, so he is fully grown. He is very, very so his rarely shed shedding.
Rate is much lower. Yeah.
So not only is the frequency lower, but also like dude's got it down. He doesn't need help. He's good to go. No,
and you're confident in your care that he has what he needs.
Yes. And so in terms of that with geckos, so for crested geckos, gargoyle geckos, chahua geckos, all those species, like it really has to do with the moisture in the air, their ambient humidity that is like hugely helpful and really important. And that is usually controlled by misting systems or foggers or whatever. With leopard geckos and African fat-tailed geckos, how that is maintained is with a humid hide that they can go. And usually that's with either damp paper towels or sphagnum moss or cocoa core, cocoa fiber, things like that. So that is how you maintain those humidity levels. And because, for example, specifically talking about leopard geckos, they're not a species that needs high humidity at all, but during their shedding time, they do need a little bit of help, which is what the humid hide's for.
Right. I'm just imagining like Charlie going into what feels like a closet, his little humid hide, and then like changing his outfit, and then like
it's his favorite hide. He's always in that hide anyway. That's his favorite one. That's where he sleeps.
Yeah.
And so like he always goes in there, and I have like cocoa fiber on the bottom that's always moist, and he just like goes in there, and so I just never see him shed.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a rare occurrence, and he eats it so fast. I'll occasionally just find little chunks, and I'm like, oh, okay, that happened.
Yep.
So
then with dry shedders, it's the opposite. So chameleons are considered dry shedders, so I can speak to this a bit more.
I'm going to mention neither of us have bearded dragons, but beardies are in this exact same
dry
category.
Shedders. Yeah. So a common question I get asked all the time is someone's chameleon will be shedding. It looks like it's stuck shed. It's not actually stuck shed. It's just shed that hasn't come off yet, which is different. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But they want to help them. And so they're like, oh, should I mist them more? Or they like try and spray them down or whatever else. And like, that's pretty much the worst possible thing that you could do to help them shed.
I did that so much with Barney when he was younger. And I felt so stupid once I learned otherwise. So just know I've done it. Some people have done it, but it is not good.
Yeah. It doesn't help them.
Yeah.
And because they're dry shedders, the skin needs to be dry to flake off. So if we spray them, it goes and is wet and just sticks.
It's just going to stick
up against them. And so then it has to dry out again in order to flake off. And so that's when I always use the analogy of a sunburn. Yes. When you're peeling and then you take a shower and it gets all like stuck kind of like... You know the feeling.
We've all experienced
it. And then it dries off and then it like peels off again. So the best thing you can do is just ensure your humidity levels are in their proper ranges
for that species.
So for a panther chameleon, 50%, right? So as long as you're in that 50%, then like you're good. Mist is normal. If they get wet from their misters, totally fine. It's not one of those where you like stop missing or miss more. Just like,
don't panic.
Keep doing what you're doing, right? Keep them in their healthy ranges. And then again, they know what they're doing. They will shed in their own time. They will rub against their branches. Like, they'll do their thing.
Which, not to just keep hyping up bioactive, but for things like snakes and other like more terrestrial lizards, like bioactive not only is great for helping maintain your proper humidity levels, but it also, you know, you should have, you know, cork bark and branches and rocks and things like that in their enclosure that they can rub up against.
Sorry.
You're good. But things that they can rub up against to help them get that shed off. That's like one of the benefits of having those accessories in there, is so that that can help them shed when they need it. And
absolutely.
I've actually caught some of my like snakes and stuff, like actually like rounding the corner on different things, trying to like get their shed pulled off.
They'll do what they need to do. One of my favorites is when chameleons take their feet and like kind of like scratch at their...
They scratch it like a dog.
Yes.
It's literally like when a puppy's like scratching its ears. Like, it's just like that.
Yeah,
it's
and they're
so
like trying
cute.
to get their shed off.
It's the cutest thing, because at least in my experience, chameleons are the species that are like the most annoyed by their shed. At least for my experience. I know bearded dragons also get very annoyed with their shed as well. But they're so funny. They'll literally scratch it off like a dog.
Yep. So we talked about some signs of like knowing when your reptiles are going to shed. But we have not hit on the big one here. This whole in blue thing. What does it have to do with shedding?
So we called this red, white, and in blue. And that is because specific to snakes.
Yes.
So if you're a snake person, you already know this. If you're not, maybe you don't. But in blue is the like little descriptor that reptile keepers use when their snakes essentially have that milky blue look in their eye. And what that is, if you're not familiar, snakes actually have a scale over their eye.
Eye caps, right?
Yes. And so when they shed, that scale also sheds.
Right. So it's getting looser. Is that the right? Okay. That's.
I don't know if it's necessarily looser. Maybe.
I feel like it would like start to pull away from the eye and like kind of give that kind of like milky look to it.
So basically, when snakes are in this blue period, you have to be pretty careful with how you're dealing with them. Like for me personally, as soon as I notice that my snakes are going into blue, I don't touch them. And this kind of goes for almost any reptile that is in shed. You kind of just want to leave them be.
Yep.
Most of the time, you don't need to help them. You don't really need to do anything to assist. Like we said, it's like the most natural process for them.
Appetites can also decrease or increase. I've seen it go both ways. But if you see a fluctuation in appetite or how much they're moving around, because sometimes they'll move more and sometimes they'll move less depending. And it could be from one shed to the other, different behaviors.
Yes. So the appetite decrease is huge, but it's also specifically with snakes, you might see them become a little bit more testy or a little bit more like uncertain in terms of behavior. And that's because realistically, when their eyes are like that, when they're in blue, guys, they can't see.
Right.
Like they can barely see. It's probably...
It's a very vulnerable
state
for them.
It's so vulnerable.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where like you kind of have to judge it for yourself, but when you see them going into that, like you, in my opinion, you really don't handle them unless absolutely necessary, just because they are going to be very vulnerable. They're more likely to bite during that time
just
frame.
Defensive because they don't know what's happening.
They're scared. They don't know what's going on. So that's one of those times that you just kind of like respect their space, and they will come out of blue, and then you'll get a lovely little shed present, which is the best. We love shed presents.
Yeah.
So...
do you have any advice for like preserving a snake shed? Because I know you've kept all of yours.
I literally have. The only times that I haven't kept sheds are if they rip, like, and when I say rip, I mean like in chunks, like if they're not like a full shed. But every full shed I've ever gotten from my snakes, I always keep. And so I've got like a little box full of them. But you do have to be careful, because I actually, this is kind of a funny story. So I keep all of my sheds in just like a little basket. And I recently was going through all of those, and some of the sheds at the very bottom, I clearly had like one or two escaped dubia roaches, and they ate some of them.
Oh.
So I would suggest putting them in like a Ziploc bag.
Something a little more secure.
Something a little bit more secure, because I definitely had like some of my sheds like munched. Yeah. So definitely like I would keep them in like, you can keep them in a Ziploc baggie. Some people will make jewelry
Do you
out
need
of
to like
them.
press them or like is there?
No, I just kind of fold them up.
Okay.
Honestly, you can fold them up. You can roll them up. I wouldn't say there's like a specific way of like dealing with it.
Okay. I was just curious. I've never dealt with a snake
But
shed.
I will say one thing, and I actually haven't tried this because I don't know, I guess I just like to do things the hard way. But a lot of the times when after a snake sheds, the shed that they leave is all raveled up and like bunched up into a ball because they essentially kind of turn the shed almost inside out a little bit as they're coming out. And so you have to like unravel that. So one tip that I've always heard is that if you like spritz it with some water to kind of rehydrate it, it'll be less likely to rip as you're unraveling it. Because I always like to unravel mine and see how long they are. Minor side note, but important one. For snakes specifically, you might naturally like assume that however long that shed is how long your snake is.
Oh, yes, that's a good point.
Not true. It is not how long that is, and that is because that skin stretches out so much. So like Tarzan's most recent shed that I just got the other day, he's my yellow anaconda. His most recent shed is nearly 5 feet long. He is not 5 feet long.
Right.
He's like maybe 4. So like you got to know that. So definitely don't like go around saying you have like, this huge snake. Like just know that that's not an accurate measurement
for their length. Yeah. That's fair.
It's a good way of like guesstimating. Like I know that if his shed is about 5 foot long, he's probably closer to like 4, maybe like 4 and a couple inches, maybe a little less than 4, but like it can stretch upwards of like a whole foot. So it's good to know. So just important tangent.
Good to know. Okay. And then I feel like we should talk about your scaleless corn snake because there's nuances that come with shedding when you have species that, maybe don't have normal.
This is a great thing to bring
texture.
up. I actually hadn't even thought of this. This is such a great point. So Taz is my scaleless corn snake. And just to be super clear for anybody who knows, we will talk about ethical versus unethical morphs in a different video probably soon. And scaleless corn snakes are not an unethical morph, and that is because they are naturally found occurring as adults in the wild.
And they have belly scales, which is the big one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They have belly scales that help protect them. So what's crazy is that when he sheds, like the underside of it is the scales and the top half of it is this like weird paper thin material.
Yeah, I've seen his sheds. Yeah.
It's so strange. But all of that being said, I have little to none of his sheds and full sheds. And the reason being is that because his sheds are so paper thin and there's no texture on them, he tends to just rip them up as he's shedding them off.
Yeah.
And so while, a regular corn snake, it's so much easier to get a full shed from them, a scaleless corn snake, it's going to be much more difficult to get a full shed. And I know a lot of people, specifically with snakes, it's almost like a badge of honor to get like a full shed from a snake. And that's because if you get a full shed from a snake with the eye caps included on it, that's almost like a sign that your husbandry is like doing well.
I remember when you first got Taz and he wasn't having these clean,
I was kind of freaking
full
out.
sheds. You're like, what is going on?
What am I doing wrong?
Because to your point, a healthy snake that has like full scales, right? In theory, should shed in one piece if their humidity is correct. Everything else, it is indicative of good health.
I wouldn't say indicative of good health, but more indicative of good husbandry.
Yes, so environment.
Their environment is providing everything that it needs to be in order for them to have a proper shed.
Yeah, great clarification. So that's why I wanted to bring it up though, because I know you were like so frustrated.
I was so worried.
Like, what is going on?
But now I've just kind of accepted that because he's scaleless, his sheds are just much more sensitive. And so they almost always rip in half, break into 3 pieces.
Yeah.
Like it's just not consistently in one piece. And that's just because it's more sensitive.
Yeah.
And
totally get that.
That is a thing. So just know that if you have like a morph that might have something a little bit different, like a scaleless corn snake or a scaleless rat snake, those are 2 different species, you might experience that a little bit.
Yeah. So. I'd be curious too, because there's some bearded dragon species, right? That like leatherbacks and stuff like that.
Yes.
So I'm curious, like, and again, we will do a future episode on like the ethics behind it.
The silkbacks are the ones that, yes.
But I'd be curious just from like a shedding standpoint if there's different nuances with that.
There's a lot, and that goes into the ethics of it big time.
Okay, we'll circle back on that. We'll circle back on that. Big thanks to Pangea Reptile for the support of the podcast. They're one of the leading companies for reptile supplies, lizards, and their world-famous gecko food.
They just released their brand new micro feeding dishes made specifically for baby or micro geckos. These smaller dishes can be mounted to smooth surfaces and even branches and will help stop your gecko from getting food all over their enclosure. If you own a gecko, you know exactly how nice it'll be to not have to clean food paw prints everywhere.
Head on over to PangeaReptile.com to check out these new micro dishes along with their other amazing products like their face packs for shipping, chameleon kits, and gecko food. So I think we should circle back on the concept of stuck shed or things that can go wrong. So maybe we should start with eye caps.
Yes. So that is a huge thing. If you notice that your snake, the shed that you have received, there is no eye cap, that most likely means that the eye cap is stuck on the snake. If that is the case, do not, under any circumstances, ever try to take that eye cap off yourself. You will injure your snake. It should only be done by professional veterinary pros. That should never be done by a novice keeper or somebody who has no experience in veterinary care. That is like one of the most dangerous things that you could do is try to take an eye cap off unprofessionally. So that can just harm your snake big time. And if that happens over and over, they can get multiple eye caps stuck.
Well, they're like layered on there. Yeah.
And that can also impair their eyesight over time.
Yes, and then make them a more defensive, testy, feisty snake because they literally can't see.
They can't see. Yeah. It also can make them not eat if they have a stuck eye cap and you don't know that because they might not be able to see their prey. They might not be, they also might be uncomfortable. And so they don't want to eat because they're uncomfortable because they can't see. And there's this tiny eye cap on there that is, because that also is going to prevent that eyeball from growing properly. Yeah. So that is a super dangerous thing. So I would say like anytime your snake sheds, you should always be checking to make sure that both eye caps have come off. That's very important. But also go to a vet. Go to a vet. That's number one.
Do not try this at home. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the big thing with snakes, as far as like stuck shed goes, the eyes in particular. Then when we get to lizards, it's typically their feet and tails that we see issues. Yes. Yeah. So little leopard gecko toes are notorious for shed getting stuck on there, which again, if your environment is correct and if you can provide them the correct parameters so they can shed, you should not have any issues. Yeah. Which is why when I said is like healthier, it's more husbandry than anything else.
But the husbandry contributes to their health, so you're not wrong.
Yes, it's all connected. All connected. Yeah. So the amount of times I've seen leopard geckos with like basically amputated toes.
Also bearded dragons too.
Yeah, because they have the little
claws,
little fingers. Yeah.
Yeah. So what can happen with that is, if over time that shed gets stuck, especially when they're babies, if it's stuck and if it never gets removed, that shed as they grow is just going to get tighter and tighter.
It's like a rubber band that you like tie around your finger. And then your finger turns purple and you're like, how long can I go before I got to take this rubber band off? Imagine that, but it's your gecko that's growing and growing and growing, and it's constricting their little toes and cutting off the circulation is what's happening.
And the same thing happens with the tips of tails.
Yes. So that's the other one. So Socks, my foster chameleon, he has this little teeny tiny divot on his tail, which like most people probably wouldn't even notice, but I'm like, inspecting him. I'm like, let me see you. Yeah. And I can see this teeny tiny, and my best guess is that there's a little piece of shed that probably didn't get all the way off, and whoever was taking care of him didn't catch it. So he's got this little divot on there.
And that happens all the time. And like it's not a big deal if that happens to yours. It's okay. It happens. But if you do notice that like one of their fingers is getting like restricted, something like that, like what I would do in that situation, there are a few things you could do like before going to a vet. And one of the number one things is to get a Tupperware and put on the bottom of it a warm, wet paper towel and have some holes in like the top of the Tupperware or whatever the tub or container is that you're doing this in, depending on the size of the animal and yada, yada. But put like a warm, wet, damp paper towel and essentially just create like a little humid hide and put them in there with a little bit of like, warm water and damp paper towel at the bottom and leave them in there for like I don't know, like a good, like in between like 30 and 45 minutes, I would say. And hopefully that humidity should help loosen some of that skin and get some of that off. But if that doesn't work, again, take them to the vet, because sometimes that finger or that tail tip or whatever has died and might need to be removed. Necrotic. That's the right word. Thank you.
Well, in instances of chameleons, you don't want to soak them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's there's nuances, and like really there's what my point bringing this up is, one, so you can be aware, so you can look for it and hopefully prevent it to getting to that point.
Yes.
But also too, there is a difference between shed that is just hasn't come off yet, and something that is truly stuck shed, because I get all the time, and like, appreciate you guys reaching out, because I'd rather you ask than not ask.
For sure.
But they're like, oh, this is stuck shed, and it's really just like a flake that just like is on their arm. That just like hasn't come off yet, or on their back, or on their spikes. I'm like, that has zero risk of constricting anything. It's toes, it's tails. Those are the things you gotta look out for. And even then, give them a couple days, right? Because especially as they get older and they're taking longer to shed, you're used to them being as a baby and it poofing off, and now it's taking longer. Like, just give them time. But if it's been longer than that, then that's when we need to do something about it.
Completely agreed. But so when I'm talking about that humid hide, I'm more so thinking about like crested geckos, leopard geckos, African fat-tailed geckos, maybe bearded dragons with toes, maybe. But again, I don't have a beardy, so don't take my word for it on that. But it's also a very common thing with snakes to put them in kind of like a humid hide if they really need it. So very species specific. It just depends. Obviously, do your research. But I think the main gist of it is like, don't freak out. Like, don't freak out, and make sure that your husbandry is on point. And typically that's going to resolve any shedding issues.
One more thing we need to talk about is peeling videos. Because if you're on TikTok or the internet for that matter, you will see people peeling shed off. You'll see what's really popular is for snakes to basically like
hold
a tube
the snake and like
pull the shed off. We'll see bearded dragon. They also have little, not necessarily eye caps, but like shed on their
the most popular one is the nostril.
Oh, the nose. That's what I'm thinking of.
That's the most popular.
Shed in the nose, or chameleon. It's very tempting. You see the flake and you just want to peel it. I get it. Okay.
It's satisfying. I understand. Don't do it.
No.
Ever. It is potentially very, very harmful for them if you are peeling something off too soon or when it's not ready. And no offense, but like, it's not up to us to decide when it's ready to come off. That is up to the animal and what they're dealing with shedding.
No, and what we talked about with the stuck shed of like the constricting, that is when there should be intervention. But that's because they're at risk of literally losing
a limb,
toes or tails, right? Like,
exactly.
And that again has to get to a point where like intervention is necessary, but you should give them time to like do it on their own.
But peeling off their shed for them, A, it's just unnatural. B, you could literally take off some of their scales if you're doing it incorrectly, or if you misjudge whether or not it's ready to come off, which is easy to do. So like, again, we don't know when it's ready to come off. You might think you know, but you could make that fatal mistake and rip off some of their scales. So
and there's no benefit to the animal. Like they're not better off for it because of that.
That's one of those times where I think it's a selfish desire.
Doing it for the views.
That. Yeah. So please don't do that.
So I just wanted to touch on it because we see it all the time, and it's very tempting. You know, you can peel your own sunburn all you want. You can
go get sunburn.
You can take Elmer's glue. You know, you ever do that as a kid?
There are ways to scratch that itch that do not harm your animal.
You peel the glue off. You know,
I did that as a kid all the time. I would put it between my hands. I did that all the time.
And then you just sit there and you're peeling glue off your fingers.
Yeah.
That is much safer.
I get it. There are ways to do this without harming your animal. So yeah, but that's very important to touch on for sure.
Cool. So, are we good on shedding?
I think so. Yeah. All right. So we have a Q&A coming up next, and I believe this is from @Jessica's_reptiles. And so Jessica has asked us if we prefer houseplants, candy, or flowers as gifts, which I think is kind of like a fun, interesting question.
Only reptile keepers would put in houseplants as one of those options. Most people would just be like, flowers or candy? Yeah. And then, because I think she said like candy, flowers, and houseplants. Yeah. And I was like, you know.
You get it. You get it, Jessica. You get it.
You know the way to a reptile girly's heart.
I'm a houseplant girl all the way.
I am all of the above.
I am too.
Like, I would be equally happy. Like, if I got candy, flowers, or houseplant, like, my immediate reaction or response would be equal across the board. I wouldn't get more excited
for
over
one or the
others.
other.
Like, I love candy, I love getting flowers, and I love houseplants. So I would be, like, equally excited.
Perfectly happy with it. Yeah. I'm specific to the plants of any kind, whether they are flowers or houseplants. I'm the same way between those two. Yeah. Like, but if I got candy, I'd be like, okay, cool.
Yeah. Candy's a lower tier for you.
But if we're talking like other dessert treats, that's more my jam.
Yeah.
Like last night, Logan went and got me some like strawberry shortcake and a tres leches cake. And I was like, I'm obsessed with you.
Love it. Yes.
So,
time and place.
Yeah.
Time and place.
I'm just not a huge candy girl, but a houseplant any day or flowers. I'm a big, right now is peony season. And I just got some from Trader Joe's and I love peonies on my dining room table. So any kind of flowers or plants, I'm a happy camper.
We're in the dead season right now for candy. We're in summer.
This is true.
There's no summer holiday that has candy associated with it. You have to wait till Halloween to get candy because then that starts the season. So it
totally does.
After Easter, it's like, all right.
You're correct. It is candy dead season. Yeah. It's so sad. But I'm sure you stocked up on your peeps, so you're good to go.
I had a box last night. I'm not going to lie.
Of course you did. Of course you did.
Yellow bunnies.
Well, is that
delicious.
it for our Q&A?
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Yeah. And if you ever have any questions, we throw up Q&As on Instagram. So follow the podcast at the Wild Type Podcast if you aren't already.
Yeah. And that's specifically usually on Instagram.
Yeah.
Just clarifying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so up next we have a fun little Would You Rather segment.
Yes. And because of the holiday, again, sorry to all of our listeners who are not in the U.S.
We love you guys too, we swear.
But for 4th of July, it's very traditional to have a barbecue. So we thought it'd be fitting and fun, sticking with the red, white, and blue theme we've got going here, to do barbecue favorites. But would you rather? So we're putting 2 barbecue classics head to head, and then we have to pick which one we would rather eat.
I'm excited. I will say I'm not I love barbecue, but when I'm in the mood for barbecue. And when I'm in the mood for barbecue is summer and 4th of July.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm very excited.
Absolutely. So first one, we've got hot dog or hamburger.
This one's a hard one for me.
What? Hot dog. I'm team hot dog all the way.
I'm team hot dog. If I didn't get a hot dog stuck in my esophagus a few years ago and I have to have surgery to have it removed.
Okay. I didn't think you were going to talk about this, but now that you've said it.
I have an esophagus issue that causes inflammation. So I got a hot dog stuck in my throat one time. And so I also prefer hot dogs, but these days I'm going to go burger.
Safer choice. Yeah. Okay. And I was there for the hot dog.
It happened at a reptile expo.
I was there. We went to the concession stand and got hot dog. Now, this all would have been fine if you had smaller pieces, right?
I know.
That's the issue, right? It's like the bigger.
Sometimes it got stuck because it was more of like a processed food, so it didn't break down as much. But yes, I also didn't chew enough, so that part's on me a little bit. But
yeah.
yes.
So basically, we're at the Reptile Expo for a couple hours. We stop for lunch, right, at the concession stand. Typical concession food. So we have like hot dogs or whatever. Then we go back into the expo, and she's like basically struggling to like breathe, basically. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" And you're like, I'm fine. She was not fine. She was fine, but not fine.
It was stuck for 24 hours before Logan made me go to the ER.
So literally, we're at this Reptile Expo, and every 5 seconds, I'm like, "You good? Like you
kind
good?"
of, not really.
And you're like, "Yes, but no, but yes, but no. I want to be here, but I'm not really okay. But I'm good enough to stay. But like, we should probably leave soon." It was one of those situations.
There's one thing about me, I persevere.
Oh, no doubt.
I push through.
No doubt.
But I probably shouldn't have that time. So
no.
I was not expecting to talk about that. It just popped in my head, and I couldn't not say it.
It's all right. So I'm team hot dog because I have not almost died from it. Yeah. But
I'm team burger now.
All right, we'll answer that one. Okay, so next up we've got, would you rather have a potato salad or macaroni salad?
Ugh, macaroni. I think macaroni. I'm much more of a pasta girly.
I would also pick macaroni, but my thing is they always put raw onions in the salads.
Yeah, and I don't like that
and like
either.
Celery and like I just don't. I like the flavor of the macaroni sauce.
I do
like
too.
I love a good mayonnaise, but I don't like the raw onion, celery, whatever else they put in there.
I actually completely agree.
So I end up just trying to get the noodle.
Yes.
Like I take my fork and I just poke the noodle and I try and eat around all the
100%.
other stuff. So
yeah, no, I'm kind of the same way because I like the flavor of onions and I like raw crunchy onions in like salads, but not macaroni
like them in any
salads.
way.
Neither does Logan. Y'all are the same in that realm.
Not a fan. Yeah. All right, so that's my choice. Next up, we've got: would you rather have cornbread or beans?
Cornbread, but I also don't love cornbread, so I'm kind of a neither.
I would probably pick beans over cornbread, but I don't really like beans either. Like when I go to Chipotle, I say no beans.
No, I'd rather have a biscuit than cornbread, and I don't like beans hardly at all.
Yeah, I would if I'm making a plate, I'm skipping the beans. I'm skipping the cornbread. I'm going for something else.
Me too. I'm a neither. Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather have pulled pork or brisket?
Ooh, brisket.
I would do pulled pork.
Oh. Yeah, I know. I'm a big brisket girly. I love a good brisket.
It has more of that smoky flavor, whereas pulled pork typically is
a little less smoky.
And pulled pork, in my experience, also is like a little sweeter. I know that's kind of like fair. A weird to say about a meat, but I feel like
that's fair though.
Brisket is a little saltier.
I would agree.
And pulled pork is a little sweeter.
That's an interesting. I've never put it that way. That's such an interesting. But I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with that sentiment.
That's what I picked. Okay, this one I thought was fun. I came up with this one: Ruffles or Lay's.
This is so hard because if there's dip involved, Ruffles. If there's no dip involved, Lay's.
I see your thought process.
Yeah.
I would pick Ruffles probably either way, but they definitely are higher up if there's
a dip.
Like an onion
because
dip or something.
It like gets more on there, you know what I mean?
The ridges, that's the whole point. That's the whole design of the chip.
So when dip is involved, I'm a Ruffles girly. But if I just want a potato chip, Lay's forever.
Yeah, I've been on a Ruffles kick lately, and I've been buying bags of Ruffles.
My very, very favorite will always be Ruffles with French onion dip.
French onion dip, that's what I'm thinking of.
It's so good. I just had some at Father's Day over at my parents' house, and it was so good.
Yeah, the French onion dip. Really, that's what you're there for. The chip is just a method to eat.
To eat the dip.
But really, you're just going for the dip. The chip is just a way to...
I am a dip girl forever. Yeah. I love a good
French
dip.
Onion dip's good.
That one's so good. Okay.
I'm with you. Okay, we've got watermelon or like a berry mix.
Okay. Yeah, berry mix. Like I love it. I'm a berry mix girl.
Watermelon.
Oh, really?
All the way.
Oh, I love watermelon too. I'm really torn on that one.
I am a household of one, and I will get the giganto watermelons that weigh 10 pounds. Yeah. Should I really just get the mini personalized ones? Probably. But they're like $4 or $5 just for the mini ones, and it's like $3 for the giant one.
No, get the big one. So then
from a cost standpoint, I'm like, I really should just get the big one. But I'm like, man, I'm one person trying. And once you cut a watermelon, you kind of have to you can't really save it. You can't just eat half and save half. Even if you refrigerate it,
right.
Or, it's just not, it doesn't have a lot of longevity as a fruit. So,
no, that's fair. I love a good watermelon, but I think where my clarification is when I think of like a berry mix, I like strawberries and raspberries, but I don't like blueberries.
I don't like blueberries.
So, and I like blackberries. I just don't like blueberries. So I think it depends on if there's blueberries in there. 4th of July,
there's definitely going to be blueberries in there because they want the red and blue.
Then I might lean watermelon in that case.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm
on the dark side.
I'm a pretty even split, honestly.
Okay. I only like strawberries.
Oh, okay.
I don't like raspberries
or
blackberries or blueberries. Really, I only like strawberries.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's fair.
That's
hard no for you.
If it was like strawberries or watermelon, now it's a toss up, but
yeah, no, that makes sense.
You throw other berries in there, not having it. Okay, now we're kind of going to the sweets dessert section. Okay. So we've got the fruit flag cake. Say that 10 times fast.
Fruit flag cake. I almost messed it up.
Fruit flag cake. And it's like the sheet cake, you know, that's like vanilla with the white frosting.
And like there's like the Cool Whip, usually some kind of
some white frosting of sorts. And then they make the little American flag. You got your little
strawberries,
little blueberries and your strawberries, and they make it all cute and patriotic.
That's a classic. That is
classic 4th of July dessert.
Oh yeah.
So that's option 1.
Okay.
Or another American classic, a cherry pie.
Oh, I don't like cherries that much.
I don't like cherry pie.
Yeah, I'm not a cherry girl.
And I love cake.
Yeah.
So I'm picking off those blueberries and I'm going.
Yeah, I am
right
too.
in for the
I'm definitely
fruit flag cake.
Yes, I'm also going for the fruit flag cake.
Okay.
Yes, definitely not the other one. Yeah.
Okay, and then one final nostalgic option. You can either would you rather have a vanilla drumstick or a bomb pop?
Oh, bomb pop all day.
I would probably get a drumstick. So to be clear for anyone who doesn't know what a drumstick is, I don't know if this is like a worldwide thing. Yeah. But you've got like the waffle cone with the vanilla ice cream chocolate dipped with crushed peanuts.
Yes.
With the little chocolate bottom.
Yeah, the tippy
fudge.
The bottom of the cone is the best part because it's got the fudge down in there.
Yeah.
That's the move. It's the little cone tip.
No, I like grew up on drumsticks. Like I did too. Love those. And they now are coming out with like some crazy drumstick flavors. Like
I didn't know
Oreo dipped. You know, they've got like chocolate caramel.
I have seen the Oreo one.
Yeah. I've had those. They're good. But nothing compares like
the OG
vanilla. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the bomb pops. You want to talk through those? Those are nostalgic.
Oh, the bomb pops. So those are the popsicles that have the blue, white, and the red like chunks.
And they look like a little firework.
Yes, it looks like a little. So those are the bomb pops. Man, and you know this about me. I'm not a big ice cream girl. I prefer like sorbet or like fruity.
Yeah. I'm a big ice cream. So like I'll pick a drumstick over a popsicle, but you would go for a popsicle over it.
I just like ice cream. I like popsicles and sorbet because they're more like refreshing versus like
they're very light. Yeah.
Yes. So
and they're icy. If you like
I like the icy. So I'm a bomb pop girl for sure.
That's a great choice.
I haven't had one of those in a long time. Now
Not
I want
gonna lie,
some.
I like bought a box of them a couple weeks ago.
I love that for you.
Yeah, they're delicious.
That's a good one.
Yes. Well, that wraps it up. Those are our Would You Rathers for our 4th of July barbecue. So we hope you guys, this episode will be coming out Tuesday. Yeah. So it'll be right before the 4th of July. So we hope you guys have a good and safe holiday. Yeah. Eat some food. Hang out with your reptiles.
Do a water-related activity.
Fireworks or... Go America, whatever you want to do. Patriotic activities you want to do, or just enjoy the day off if you have the.
I'll probably just be chilling by the pool.
Yeah, so that sounds good to me.
Perfect.
With sunscreen, so you don't get sunburnt and peel.
You don't want to peel. You don't want to go into blue on 4th of July.
shed your skin. Yeah, I love these episodes though that were like educational. Like, I wish. Like there was someone to tell me this stuff when I was getting into reptile keeping.
I know. So, it's really helpful, and we know a lot of people ask a lot of questions about this stuff. So we hope it helps you guys, but stay safe this holiday season, and
we'll catch you guys in the next episode.
Bye, y'all.